At 9:17 p.m., a 911 dispatcher answered a call that lasted just 47 seconds. There was no screaming. No chaos. Just breathing. Then a whisper. "He's here." If you're drawn to real cases where the truth hides behind ordinary lives, subscribe right now. This channel breaks down the details most people miss, the digital trails, the quiet red flags, the moments that change everything. You don't want to miss what's coming next. 6 minutes later, police arrived at a quiet suburban home in Texas. The front door was open. The lights were on. A wine glass lay shattered on the kitchen floor. Upstairs, the bed had been stripped. One pillow was missing. And something on the mattress looked like it had been cleaned in a hurry. Emily Carter was gone. Her husband said he had been at the gym. But his clothes weren't sweaty. His phone wasn't there. And the home security cameras had been manually disabled for minutes before that 911 call. 11 days later, a pillowcase weighted with rocks was found in a nearby lake. Inside that lake was Emily. And the whisper she made before the line went dead. It wasn't about a stranger. It was about the men she married. Stay with me, because what police found on his laptop changes everything. On October 12, 2024, at 9:17 p.m., a 911 dispatcher in Collin County, Texas, answered a call that would later be replayed so many times in a courtroom that every breath inside that recording began to feel like evidence. At first, there was nothing but air. Not screaming. Not chaos. Just breathing. Shallow. Controlled. Measured, like someone trying desperately not to let fear leak into sound. The dispatcher adjusted her headset slightly. 911, what's your emergency? 3 seconds passed. Then a whisper so faint it nearly dissolved into static. He's here. The dispatcher straightened in her chair. Ma'am, who is there with you? Are you somewhere safe? There was a faint rustling. A subtle shift. Something brushing against fabric. A quick thud, like weight hitting carpet. Then the line disconnected. The call lasted 47 seconds. It was traced to a 2-story brick home on Maple Hollow Drive in Frisco, a city consistently ranked among the safest in Texas. Patrol units were dispatched immediately. 6 minutes later, officers turned onto a quiet street lined with symmetrical lawns and identical porch lights glowing in warm amber. Nothing looked disturbed. No frantic neighbors outside. No broken glass. Just another peaceful suburban evening. Except the front door of the Carter residence was slightly open. Officers approached cautiously. They announced themselves. No response. Inside, the house was illuminated. Lamps on. Television screen glowing with a paused cooking competition. A throw blanket neatly folded on the couch. It looked like someone had simply stepped away mid-evening. In the kitchen, however, something interrupted the normalcy. A wine glass lay shattered across white tile. Dark red liquid pooled beneath it, spreading slowly between grout lines. On the counter beside it was a smartphone. The screen still active. Call ended, 9:17 p.m. Upstairs, the master bedroom was almost too tidy. The bed was stripped. The fitted sheet missing. One pillow gone. An officer ran a flashlight slowly across the mattress surface. There was faint discoloration near the center. Not obvious. But not natural. It looked like something had been cleaned. At 9:39 p.m., headlights turned into the driveway. Daniel Carter stepped out of a gray SUV. 34 years old. Athletic build. Clean haircut. Calm eyes. He slowed when he saw patrol cars. What's going on? He asked. When told about the 911 call from his home, he blinked once. That doesn't make sense. I've been at the gym. He gestured toward his car. I just got back. One of the officers noticed immediately that Daniel's t-shirt was completely dry. No sweat at the collar. No flushed skin. No smell of exertion. His gym bag, when later checked, contained folded clothes. Unused. Inside the house, Daniel called out, "Emily." He walked room to room. Controlled. Measured. not frantic. Emily Carter was 32 years old. A pediatric nurse at Baylor Medical Center in Plano. Known for volunteering extra shifts during flu season. Known for remembering children's birthdays. Friends described her as cautious but kind. She had married Daniel 6 years earlier after meeting him at a cybersecurity conference where she attended with a friend. He worked remotely for a private data security firm. To outsiders, they were stable. Financially comfortable. Homeowners in a desirable neighborhood. But detectives would later learn that stability and silence can look identical from the outside. Daniel was brought to the station for questioning that night. He said he left home at 8:15 p.m. for the gym. Said Emily stayed behind watching television. Said there was no argument. When asked about the broken wine glass, he shrugged slightly. She drops things sometimes. He maintained eye contact. His breathing never changed. But the house told a different story. There was no forced entry. No broken windows. No unknown fingerprints. Crime scene technicians conducted luminol testing in the bedroom. Faint patterns appeared across the carpet near the side of the bed. Something had been wiped. Diluted. Not enough to erase entirely. Detectives requested digital data from the Carter home's smart system. The thermostat log showed the back door opened at 9:05 p.m. Closed again 3 minutes later. At 9:11 p.m., interior security cameras were manually disabled via the home network. At 9:14 p.m., a file labeled Property Sale Estimates was permanently deleted from Daniel's laptop. At 9:16 p.m., Emily dialed 911. At 9:18 p.m., Daniel sent a text message to a coworker. Still at gym. Might run late. Cell tower data placed his phone less than 1 mile from his house at 9:12 p.m. Not at the gym across town. When confronted, Daniel claimed signals bounce. Technology glitches. Cell towers overlap, he said calmly. But digital forensics recovered browser searches from Daniel's laptop dated weeks before October 12. How to temporarily disable security cameras. Average payout for life insurance claims. How long does it take water to destroy evidence? 3 weeks prior to her disappearance, Daniel had taken out a $750,000 life insurance policy on Emily. She had recently updated her own retirement account beneficiary to her younger sister. Bank records revealed mounting debt. Failed investments. Withdrawals Emily did not appear aware of. Friends began speaking. One coworker said Emily mentioned tension at home. She said he'd been asking weird questions about finances, the coworker recalled. Another friend reported Emily had recently looked into renting a small apartment, just in case. 11 days passed with no trace of her. Volunteers organized search parties. News vans lined Maple Hollow Drive. Daniel appeared on local television asking for her safe return. His voice steady. His eyes dry. Then, on October 23, a jogger near Lake Louisville spotted something unusual along the shoreline. A white fabric bundle partially submerged. Police recovered it. A pillowcase. Tied tightly at one end. Weighted with rocks. Forensic analysis matched fibers to the Carter's bedroom set. Authorities drained part of the lake. 3 days later, they recovered a body. Dental records confirmed it was Emily. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was suffocation. There were defensive bruises on her arms. Compression marks consistent with external force. Time of death estimated between 9:10 and 9:20 p.m. Exactly during the disabled camera window. Daniel was arrested on October 28. In interrogation, he denied premeditation. Admitted they argued about money. About separation. Claimed she fell. Claimed he panicked. But prosecutors believed something else. They believed the whisper, "He's here," was not fear of a stranger. It was recognition. The trial began in June 2025. Jurors heard the 911 recording. 47 seconds of breathing. A whisper. Silence. The prosecution reconstructed the timeline minute by minute. Digital evidence. Financial motive. Forensic patterns. Cell tower maps. The defense argued emotional explosion. Not planning. But then prosecutors introduced one final piece. A deleted draft email found in Daniel's archived folder. Dated October 5th. Subject line, contingency. The email referenced starting over and being free of financial weight. It was never sent. But it showed thought. After 9 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. Daniel Carter was sentenced to life without parole. In court, before sentencing, the judge replayed the 911 call. Breathing. A whisper. He's here. And then nothing. But that wasn't the end of the story. Because what investigators later uncovered about the months leading up to October 12 painted a far more disturbing picture, one that suggested Emily may have known exactly what Daniel was capable of, and may have been planning her escape. In the weeks after Daniel's arrest, investigators began reconstructing not just the night of October 12, but the months leading up to it. Because crimes like this rarely begin in a single moment. They begin quietly. With small fractures. Emily had kept a journal. It wasn't hidden in a dramatic way. It sat inside a canvas storage box beneath folded sweaters in her closet. Detectives found it during a secondary search of the home. The entries weren't written daily. They were scattered. Some weeks blank. Others filled with tight, hurried handwriting. 6 months before her death, one entry read, "Something feels off. I can't explain it. He's distant. Not angry. Just calculating." Another entry, dated August 3rd. "He keeps asking about my retirement account. I told him it's not something I want to touch. He laughed, but it didn't feel like a joke." In September, the tone shifted. "Tonight he stood in the doorway watching me for a long time. I pretended not to notice. I don't know why I didn't say anything." There were no dramatic accusations. No explicit fear. But the language changed. It moved from partnership to observation. From we to he. Detectives also learned that Emily had quietly met with a financial advisor in late September. She had inquired about separating accounts. About freezing joint credit cards. About what documentation she would need if she chose to file for divorce. She hadn't told Daniel. Phone records showed she had also contacted a rental property management office 2 weeks before her death. A one-bedroom apartment, 30 minutes away. It was never leased. But it had been discussed. The prosecution would later argue that Daniel discovered her plans. That the property sale estimates file deleted from his laptop at 9:14 p.m. was tied to Emily's suggestion that they sell the house and split equity. Digital forensics recovered fragments of that deleted file. It included projected profits from a quick sale. It also contained a separate column labeled individual allocation. Emily's name was listed. Half the value. On October 10th, 2 days before her death, security footage from a nearby hardware store showed Daniel purchasing heavy-duty rope, a tarp, and additional cleaning agents. He used a self-checkout lane. He paid in cash. When detectives searched the Carter home's attic, they found the tarp packaging discarded inside a trash bag. The rope was never recovered. Neighbors began sharing more information. A woman across the street recalled seeing Daniel carrying something bulky wrapped in what looked like bedding on the night of October 12th. It was dark. She assumed it was trash. But it was around 9:30 p.m. The timeline tightened. Cell phone GPS data from Daniel's vehicle, more precise than tower pings, placed his SUV near Lake Louisville at 10:02 p.m. He had told police he arrived home at 9:39 p.m. Security cameras from a gas station near the lake captured a vehicle matching his SUV at 9:54 p.m. Headlights. Same roof rack. Same dent on the rear bumper. The license plate wasn't visible. But the timestamps matched. When confronted during interrogation, Daniel insisted he had driven around to clear his head after discovering Emily missing. He claimed panic. Disorientation. But investigators noted something else. His internet search history from the evening of October 12th included: how long before body bloats in water? That search occurred at 11:26 p.m. From his home Wi-Fi network. Emily's journal contained one final entry, written just 3 days before her death. "I don't think he would hurt me. But I also didn't think he'd look at me the way he does now. Like I'm a problem to solve." Those words would later be read aloud in court. The trial became less about a sudden argument and more about escalation. The prosecution presented a timeline stretching back months. Financial pressure. Loss of control. Emily's quiet preparation to leave. Daniel's increasing digital searches. The hardware store purchases. The life insurance policy, taken out September 18th. The beneficiary listed solely as Daniel Carter. Insurance agents testified that Daniel had inquired specifically about payout timelines. "How quickly does it process?" he asked during a recorded call. They played that audio for the jury. He sounded polite, methodical, interested. The defense tried to redirect focus. They emphasized lack of eyewitnesses. They suggested the pillowcase and lake disposal could indicate a third party. They questioned whether cell data could be 100% accurate. They pointed to the absence of the murder weapon. But forensic specialists explained the suffocation pattern. The bruising on Emily's wrists. The fibers embedded beneath her fingernails matching Daniel's skin cells. Under cross-examination, Daniel's calm demeanor began to fracture. When shown surveillance stills from the hardware store, he hesitated. "That could be anyone," he said. But when prosecutors zoomed in on the tattoo partially visible beneath the sleeve, identical to one on his forearm, the courtroom fell silent. The prosecution's closing argument returned to the 911 call. "She didn't scream," the prosecutor said. "She whispered. Because he was close enough to hear." They replayed the 47 seconds one final time during closing. Several jurors wiped tears. The defense argued emotional overwhelm. But prosecutors reframed it as elimination. Elimination of debt. Elimination of separation. Elimination of loss. After conviction, Daniel gave one final statement. He apologized to Emily's family. But he never said her name. In prison, Daniel has maintained limited communication with the outside world. A year after sentencing, a podcast investigative team uncovered something else. A draft note saved in Daniel's encrypted cloud storage. It was written October 1st. 11 days before Emily's death. The note read, "If she leaves, everything collapses. The house. The credit. The image. I can't rebuild from zero." The note was never sent. But it revealed motive beyond anger. It revealed fear of financial ruin. Fear of public failure. Fear of losing control. Emily's family later established a scholarship fund for nursing students in her name. They declined media interviews after the trial. Her sister once said quietly to a reporter, "She tried to call for help. That's what I hold on to." Maple Hollow Drive eventually returned to normal. The house sold 18 months later. New owners repainted the walls, replaced the flooring, removed the bedroom carpet entirely. But neighbors say that for a long time after, the porch light flicked on at 9:17 p.m. Automatically scheduled by a smart timer that hadn't been reset. And for those who remembered, that minute felt heavier than the rest of the night. The case became a study in digital footprints. In how modern homes record movements silently. In how data logs can testify when victims cannot. But at its core, it remained something simpler. A woman planning to leave. A man determined not to lose. A whisper caught between them. "He's here." And the terrible stillness that followed. In the months following the conviction, the case did not fade quietly into legal archives. Instead, it became a reference point, not just for prosecutors, but for behavioral analysts, domestic violence researchers, and digital forensics teams across the country. Because what happened inside the Carter home did not begin with violence. It began with control. A forensic psychologist who later reviewed the case described Daniel's behavioral pattern as coercive containment. Not overt abuse. Not visible aggression. But subtle isolation, financial entanglement, quiet monitoring, and emotional narrowing. Emily's friends, when interviewed more deeply after the trial, began remembering things differently. "She stopped coming to group dinners," one said. At first she blamed her schedule. Then she just stopped responding. Another friend recalled that Daniel often answered Emily's phone when she was with others. He'd say she was busy, but she'd be sitting right next to us. There were no police reports of domestic disturbance prior to October 12. No documented restraining orders. No visible bruises in hospital staff locker rooms. But experts emphasized something critical: the absence of visible violence does not mean the absence of escalating control. In prison intake evaluations, Daniel underwent a full psychological assessment. The results were not dramatic. No severe psychopathy markers. No delusional disorders. No hallucinations. Instead, evaluators noted high narcissistic traits tied to external image preservation and financial status anxiety. His greatest stressor, according to reports, was loss of control over narrative and perception. Investigators would later reflect on that phrase. Loss of narrative. Loss of perception. Loss of image. Those themes echoed through everything Daniel had done. From disabling cameras to deleting files. From staging normalcy to appearing on television asking for help. The trial transcripts revealed something else that many viewers missed. When prosecutors asked Daniel directly, "Why didn't you call 911 yourself if you found your wife unconscious?" He paused for nearly 9 seconds. Then responded, "I panicked." 9 seconds. Longer than the silence on the emergency call recording. That pause was replayed in closing arguments. Because sometimes hesitation reveals more than confession. National law enforcement conferences began referencing the Carter case in training modules focused on modern domestic homicide indicators. They emphasized 3 primary warning signs. Financial isolation combined with recent insurance changes. Digital surveillance or disabling of monitoring devices. Sudden narrative control by a partner during missing person cases. The 911 whisper also changed dispatcher protocol discussions. Operators were retrained to treat whisper calls with higher urgency, particularly when a caller uses a pronoun without context. He's here. Not someone. Not there's a man. But he. Recognition embedded in fear. Emily's case became part of dispatcher training programs in several states, highlighting the importance of keeping whisper callers engaged for as long as possible through yes or no questions. Could the outcome have been different? Investigators say likely not. The window between the call and the fatal act appeared extremely narrow. But the lesson became systemic. Meanwhile, the Carter home's new owners reported something unexpected during renovations. When replacing drywall in the bedroom, contractors discovered a faint indentation pattern beneath the original paint. A section where the wall had once been pressed into. As if something heavy had leaned against it repeatedly. Forensic review suggested it was likely from furniture. But the image lingered in community memory. The house was repainted. The carpets replaced. The address eventually lost its association in real estate listings. But digital archives never forget. True crime podcasts dissected the timeline minute by minute. Online forums debated motive. Some speculated Daniel had intended to stage a longer disappearance before the body was found. Others believed the weighted pillowcase indicated rushed disposal. Lake Louisville became a quiet pilgrimage site for some who followed the case closely. Flowers occasionally appeared along the shoreline during the first year. Emily's sister rarely visited publicly. Instead, she channeled grief into advocacy. She began speaking, not about Daniel, but about early emotional warning signs. She described how easy it is to dismiss subtle discomfort. How we tell ourselves we're overthinking, she said during one seminar. How we mistake control for care. She avoided graphic details. She focused on awareness. The scholarship fund established in Emily's name grew beyond nursing students. It expanded into grants for women seeking financial independence from unstable domestic environments. The irony was painful. Financial independence was the very shift that appeared to trigger Daniel's desperation. Inside prison, Daniel maintained innocence regarding premeditation. In a monitored letter to a relative, he wrote, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." That sentence unsettled investigators more than a denial would have. Because it implied planning, just not escalation. It suggested intention with miscalculation. In year 2 of his incarceration, Daniel requested an appeal based on digital evidence interpretation. The appellate court reviewed cell tower triangulation data and forensic file recovery methods. The conviction was upheld unanimously. The digital trail was too consistent, too layered, too precise. Modern homicide investigations now rely heavily on silent witnesses, thermostats, Wi-Fi logs, vehicle GPS, smart lighting, cloud backups. In Emily's case, the home itself testified. The thermostat recorded entry and exit. The router logged camera shutdown. The laptop logged deletion. The SUV logged location. Her phone logged desperation. Each device alone may not have secured conviction. Together, they built a chorus. Years later, criminology students would study the Carter case under a specific theme: the illusion of stability. Because from the outside, everything looked orderly. The lawn trimmed. The marriage intact. The neighborhood safe. But internal fractures often leave no visible cracks. The final investigative review report, published internally within the department, ended with a reflection rarely included in official summaries. It read: victim attempted emergency contact during active assault. Recognition-based whisper suggests proximity and familiarity. Evidence indicates escalating financial stress and perceived loss of control as primary motivators. Case underscores necessity of digital forensic integration in domestic investigations. Cold. Professional. Clinical. But beneath that language sat a single human moment. 47 seconds. A whisper. Breathing carefully so as not to be heard. In later interviews, the 911 dispatcher described the call as the one that stayed with her. It wasn't loud, she said. The quiet ones are worse. She replayed it in her head for months, wondering if she could have asked a different question. If a different tone might have bought more time. But investigators reassured her repeatedly, the response time was immediate. The escalation likely irreversible. Still, emergency responders carry ghosts differently. Not of what they saw, but of what they heard. 5 years after the conviction, a documentary filmmaker approached Emily's family about producing a feature. They declined. They did not want reenactments. They did not want dramatization. They wanted silence to reclaim its space. And perhaps that is the most haunting part of the story. Not the forensic science. Not the digital precision. Not even the financial motive. But the contrast between appearance and reality. Between a smiling couple at neighborhood barbecues and a woman whispering for help inside her own home. True crime often focuses on violence. But sometimes the greater warning lies in the quiet buildup. The spreadsheets. The browser history. The beneficiary changes. The deleted files. The carefully maintained exterior. And the moment when someone realizes the person they share a life with has shifted from partner to threat. Emily's final recorded words were not dramatic. They were not elaborate. They were not a speech. They were recognition. He's here. Not confusion. Not surprise. Recognition. And in that recognition lives the tragedy. Because the most dangerous place is not always the dark alley. Sometimes it is the familiar hallway. The shared bedroom. The house that looks safe from the street. Maple Hollow Drive today is indistinguishable from any other suburban road. Children ride bikes. Mail trucks pass at noon. Porch lights glow at dusk. But data remains archived. Court transcripts remain accessible. And somewhere in a digital evidence vault sits a 47-second audio file that changed how a department trains its officers. Changed how prosecutors build digital timelines. Changed how dispatchers interpret whispers. The Carter case did not become famous for brutality. It became studied for pattern. For modern forensic layering. For the anatomy of control. And for the reminder that sometimes the clearest warning is the one spoken softly.